Okay, do you hear me now? Great. The topic of this panel is collaboration. When Gavin approached me for chairing this panel, my first thought after hearing the topic was BIM is collaboration. If you don't collaborate, you don't do BIM. You cannot do BIM in a bubble. You can up to a point, but if you want to actually implement BIM on a project or on a process, there is no way that you don't collaborate within your office, with somebody else, with your subcontractor, with your client, with anybody else. There is another key word. In the morning, over coffee, I spoke to Alejandro, and since the morning, there are two topics that have been trickling down, and two buzzwords. One is collaboration, that we are going to talk about, and the other one is language. And speaking to Alejandro this morning, we agreed that BIM is very much like speaking English in Dubai. Most of us come from somewhere else. And the only way that we can communicate is by speaking English. And everybody here speaks English in a way and understands speaking English in his own way, but still gets understood and still gets his message across. More or less, what we have in the BIM sphere or in the BIM ecosystem in Dubai or anywhere else in the world is about that, is about the language. If I say something, do I get my meaning across? Now, we have a panel of consultants, contractors, educators, and the solution provider. So I'm going to start with the solution provider and ask him, what is your company take on the collaboration? Because frankly speaking, your company has not been known for collaboration with other packages and was rather strongly, let's say, putting forward an idea that everything should be under one roof, that open BIM was, let's say, embraced or recognized relatively recently.
All right, it's a tough one, but let me just try to make it simplified. At Autodesk, we have been predominantly monitoring this industry very closely. And we classified these eras within this industry, where the first era, when we started in early 80s, it was about the era of drafting, when people were doing the same things, what they used to do manually, they started moving the same thing in computer world. You know, you had initial level of AutoCADs out there, you pick up the drafting and you got now little monitor and the mouse, you can do things. And then gradually we saw in late 90s and early 2000, basically, we saw more and more people talking about and asking us, we need tools to be more productive, where it was about how do I do part of the job and let computer do part of it. I don't want to do the repetition task. You would have seen the blocks and the models and some of the sections and elevations coming out of these applications. Then, you know, mobile happened, cloud happened, and a lot more new technologies started coming in. So we classify that era as era of connection. And that's what we look at. We have been following this trend for the last 5-6 years very closely. And that's where we realize that our customers are going to face these challenges more and more. And that's where it's not about BIM anymore. It's not about being able to share the file or the model with each other. It's about the openness. People will be using different applications, different tools. It's about that connection. How do we provide them this tool set that is going to facilitate this connected BIM? So we call it as connected BIM at Autodesk. And it doesn't limit you to one software or one tool. It's about facilitating that collaboration across the whole ecosystem. And back home at Autodesk, every time we speak, we get into a brainstorming session, we keep on reminding ourselves that difference between an AEC industry collaboration and manufacturing, because it seems to be very highly efficient in collaboration in manufacturing and automobile world. And people keep on saying, you know, we need to learn from automobile industry or manufacturing industry. And then we tend to forget the fact that they belong to one organization mostly, and they have this process defined for the last 10 years or 5 years, which they are improving. Now let me just imagine with you, and let's visualize our construction project, and how do we get together to start it. And just think about it in your office scenario when a new guy joins in, how much time it takes for him to become productive and build a relationship and build a collaborative relationship with you all. Now, in the construction world, when the project comes in, you have a consultant from one part of the world, and then you have the design, other facility things, then you have the client from other side, the contractor, subcontractor. All of them have got suddenly this 18 months of schedule to deliver. They have hardly time to really build that relationship they can collaborate. So the collaboration driven by BIM facilitates by one simple thing, the clarity, the transparency. So for me, the underlying concept of collaboration under the BIM banner is the transparency. If we are transparent from the right of the beginning and BIM facilitates that, that means less issues, more better relationships.
Thank you so much. Speaking of transparency and continuing the language theme, the question for Alan, as an educator, what is your view? How are you directing your efforts into wider understanding of the BIM concept? How do you have to fight the issue that, or the notion that BIM is a software? Do you have to fight the notion that BIM is an added value service, icing on the cake, not the base? What is your take on the communications issue?
Thank you, George. Well, I'm English, that's a start. But just to, from an RICS point of view, we think collaboration is actually the key to enabling BIM. We believe both, two issues actually, two key issues. One is, in education and training of chartered surveyors, we believe that we have to think more about how the professions work with each other in a better way. So the concept of a T-shaped professional is something that is to be looked at in the industry more and more, I believe. And that is, the concept there is that professions need to understand the workings of the other professions in the industry, because it's a team game building, in order to get the most out of their own profession. So that's not to say they don't need narrow and deep training in their own profession, but they need to understand the contributions of the other professionals in a team process. That's one issue. I think the second issue is that collaboration is a problem word, to use an English word, because it's quite ethereal in terms of its concepts, and also a lot of it's related to culture and behaviours, which are difficult to measure and difficult to change. But we believe that more can be looked at in terms of the processes connected with collaboration. So issues like interdisciplinary working, for example. There has not been enough effort in the industry to look at interdisciplinary working. The right information in the right form from the right person at the right time is pretty central to delivery of BIM, and it's pretty central to the processes surrounding interdisciplinary working. If you look at ISO 44001, the new international standard for collaboration, it talks about some of these issues, and we believe that people in the industry should try and put some meat on the bones of collaboration and look at these processes in more detail to enable success in collaboration and thereby enable success in building information modeling.
Thank you so much. What is the take of the consulting and contracting members of this panel? Craig, let's start with you and then continue with Nitin and Scott and Alejandro.
Yeah, I really believe that the key issue with the collaboration side of BIM that's happening in our industry at the moment is pretty basic, and it's communication. And we, and you're right. There's a lot of talk about language. What is the language that we use? But more importantly, do we understand that language? And what does things mean to me, to you, to someone else? Or do we all have our own interpretation? And that's a real killer. And one of the things I truly believe is that there's not enough communication happens. And by that, I just literally mean face-to-face talking between people. We have a great set of tools which all our software vendors are producing that will allow us to share these models, to share our problems, to collaborate and push all this data around. But at more fundamental level, I do believe that there's still people behind the using of these tools. And it's critical that we actually get together as a group of people and sit in a room and talk about this, so that we actually appreciate that what my understanding is the same as yours. Now, one of the things I think that really facilitates this, and I would love to see more in the industry, are strong, knowledgeable clients who are prepared to step up from the beginning and say, this is how we want our project to go. You know, we're not prepared that we're not going to be happy that it's going to be some design that's done by a consultant, and there's going to be a problem when it's passed to the contractor, and never mind the FM guy who's left at the end. And it's great, of course, to have clients like the RTA here who are very prescriptive in what they want. But not only do they have to be very prescriptive in what they want, they have to then be prepared that the people who come on board to deliver that project need to have it explained to them, and need to have it explained in a language, in a terminology that we all understand. Yeah. And one of the things that I've found as well is that sometimes the ideas that may be presented by the client and how they want their project delivered, you know, aren't necessarily maybe the best idea in the way in which to go about doing that. And I do believe that if you get the right people in the room together to talk about what's best for the project and how that project can be delivered, you know, only the project wins from this. And you know, that's one of the key things I think that we need to do, is we need to start talking. We've all been in a situation where we exchange emails with someone, and it's tennis. You know, this email goes back and forward 10 times. You pick up the phone or you meet someone in person, in 5 minutes it's resolved. Yes. You know, that's what we need to do. We need to start and actually get together more as people, talk about these issues and understand. And even earlier on we were talking about the LOD question. You know, everybody's got a different understanding of what these things are. Get together as a team, because it will be different from project to project. Of course. So get together as a project team and actually talk it through. And if the documentation that's been produced needs to be clarified, needs to have some clearer language written in it, then agree as a team and do it, so that we can all move forward and deliver the project that the client wants. It's the client's vision that we're trying to deliver.
We don't have any clients here at the moment, but we have the main contractor. Let me add one more point to the question. Based on the previous panel, the contractual details of what is a BIM deliverable. Is it something in a box with a nice ribbon on top, or is it something else? What is your take on the communication first and this second?
I will split my answer into two parts. The first part being the understanding that BIM is just not about a single aspect. It's about people, process, and technology. You need to bring these three together to make this work.
Correct.
Now, when you talk about technology, there is again two aspects to it: maturity level. You know, as a contractor, I can claim that I have the capability to deliver a BIM project, but am I considering the supply chain which is below me having at the same level of maturity? Now, I might have an M&E contractor who might be able to do BIM for me, but I would for sure struggle if I look at a facade contractor who would have the same level of maturity as another person. No disrespect to anyone on the panel.
No problem, Scott. Scott has a perfect pitch.
This is something that we face as a challenge. For instance, if I have a precast company that's involved, they would necessarily be very good at their job, but they would have very little to an in-house BIM team to develop that level of information that I'm looking for in my model. And at the end of the day, if I don't have a supply chain that can cater to my requirements, as a main contractor, I have to step in and meet and fill that gap. So you'd see that as a main contractor, the first thing that we had to really see and do was, how do we fill those gaps within the supply chain to actually make this work?
And the question is always, is that in your scope, right?
Exactly.
That's
the second part of the answer.
The famous question, is it in my scope?
That is the second part of the answer. Yeah. Then the question comes, if I do something on behalf of another person, who takes ownership for that? And how much liability am I taking on myself when I do and complete a process that's required by the client? And building that into the BIM execution plan and getting the stakeholders involved on the project to understand how this is going to work. So literally I end up sending a transmittal of a shop drawing back to the specialist contractor who's got to review and sign off on 2D. And the difficulty as a main contractor that I often come and face is we are talking about BIM, but our thought process is still in 2D.
Yes.
I mean, we talk about having a coordinated shop drawing, but we still insist on having all of the 2D elements still shown at the same level of detail that you would still see on a CAD drawing. I fail, and I find it very difficult to communicate with the people, the higher-ups, to actually understand that we're doing all of this in 3D. Do you really need to see all this information again in 2D? And probably the issue that I often get an answer is the legality of it. I mean, you don't have a system which says that the 3D model can take ownership of what is being done without the 2D drawing or without having explicitly everything done to the nitty-gritties of it on a 2D drawing. And that is a challenge.
Yes, if I could just before Scott replies, what Craig said about talking to people face to face.
Yes.
I have the same experience of sending somebody a snapshot of the model.
Yes.
He sends shot drawings, I command the shot drawings, I send them back, and 3 weeks later he still doesn't understand what I want. Then I really get upset, take my marquee, snapshot, poof, oh, that's what you want. Great.
It takes time.
Yes,
it really does.
But the legality of the process is one thing. Doing the job is sometimes another thing.
Well, that's what we want to change the industry. The real change will come when we don't have to really start worrying about legality, because it is part of the process as it is.
It was the previous panel anyway. We are on another topic. So Scott, from your point of view as a specialist consultant, so you're not so much in the wider picture, but you're very much in the flow. Communication, number 1, education, number 2, contractual issues, number 3.
Mm-hmm. I think what we absolutely acknowledge is the benefits that BIM will bring to consulting in the entire supply chain of a building life cycle, from cradle to cradle, essentially, from right to the very early planning stages, right the way through design, construction, well, tender, construction, handover, and operation, and even then decommissioning of buildings as well. And I think we've also seen huge opportunities with the efficiency this can bring to the table. Now, that being said, we can't jump the gun here. There's a reality that has to be taken in, that although a client might push for everybody to embrace BIM or a certain, they want Revit, for example, used for the entire project, everybody in the supply chain is not going to be able to provide or undertake Revit models. And that's where part of the initial challenge is always going to lie. We're not there at the moment where we can say everybody needs to use BIM and needs to collaborate and needs to do that. But I think that adoption is going to happen over time, and I think people are going to see that, okay, that there's collaboration internally within a company where people can see that, okay, we can develop a new process, use technology to optimize the way we do things. And then, they will hopefully see that using technology to do that, the easiest way to adapt that from buildings is if we're all working off the same model or the same type of model.
Yes.
Was there another question? Sorry to...
No, that was, you have covered more or less everything. Alejandro, we had a chat in the morning. We were discussing about the communication between the different stakeholders and I will have one question for the end for all of you, but let me hear you on your views on the collaboration and communication, number 1.
Collaboration and communication. I was focusing more on internally because we have ASMEP. I say we're kind of spoiled with it because you'd expect, here we are in the same company, we should be able to communicate and collaborate much easier. With that, BIM does make it much easier, but at the same time, it almost, the lack of understanding of BIM and the process, they think we're using the tool, so then it should be understood. Like when a change is made, going back to having the human-to-human communication, whether it's with an email or something, that gets lost. And with that, when it comes to the collaboration, it's, again, thinking that the tool's going to take care of everything. And that becomes a problem. But at the same time, it once used, and when you are communicating, when you are showing those 3D views and saying, this is what I want, then it's amazing, and it works very well. I think for everybody to communicate, even when it comes to the other stakeholders outside the company, whether it's the clients or the contractors, again, it's everybody's understanding that process or the expectations the same. And with that, what's going to be the use of the model, you know, as far as even the level of detail. Somebody refers to 300, 350.
500 as built
500.
for FM, right?
and it's for facility management, and how much detail do you really need, and how much information do you need? And quite frankly, when it comes to construction documents, you're really at a level of 200, 300, and it's enough to get your construction documents, it's enough to get your coordination, your clash detection of the major issues, and really get what you need. Later, then you start bringing it up to those other levels.
Yeah.
But I've seen it asked even before, and I think of the collaboration and the communication that's happening at the LOD, say 200 to 300, and if it was higher than that, and then you're talking about a tower, one of the bigger projects, and when they make changes at the end, and then what that's going to take, it's
As
almost
they always do.
it's incredible.
Yes, you can, of
Can I
course.
just add a
Yes.
quick comment on there, on this particular point? And it's great that, I mean, there's already been a lot of talk today about PAS 1192, and it's great that we can actually refer to a standard like that, you know, that's this sort of common reference. But again, just to emphasize this understanding what that is, and this LOD, we have to, yes, it's great to have these standards, but we have to have a common sense approach to some of it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
should we model a paint finish on a wall? You know, no.
We can.
You can, you can, but because you can, you know, that doesn't
You
make
know how
it,
they say, you
doesn't
should
make
not
it right.
only because you can, right?
We increasingly have buildings that have very complex facades,
Yes,
and that brings with it its own problems.
yes.
Is it necessary that those facades have every nut, bolt, screw, you know, modelled and detailed, and you
Scott,
know?
what do you say?
So there's lots of common sense questions that we need to be asking ourselves on top of this, just so that people understand
Yeah,
what
yeah.
we're talking about.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say on
Facade
facades,
consultants
yeah,
were
you're doing
mentioned
facade
more than once,
consultancy.
so,
Yeah,
yeah,
we absolutely, you know, we've seen the benefits of being able to develop in-house families of different facade types and units that we can repeat and replicate. And this is exactly the opportunity that BIM brings forwards to us, in that someone can provide us a model and we can very, very quickly improve our efficiency of delivering a project by having everything modeled, all the details are there, as deep as you want to go, or as high level as you want to go, and being able to zoom in and out. And I think this is exactly where part of the problem comes in, though, when you also see a lot of companies now attempting to outsource BIM, because they see that that's going to, okay, they've been told they need to do it, they try to outsource it, and it doesn't work at all. It defeats the object entirely. You need to embrace this in-house, develop this in-house, develop this internally, and then be able to use that to complement, you know, the projects.
Quick question for a closing answer. I would like an answer from you who operate here in the construction field. So you two gentlemen are excluded, unless you have something to add, of course. The initiative from Dubai municipality from 4 years ago, the initiative from DIVA, the initiative from RTA, they are extremely important. And it's extremely, what Craig said, if we have a standard, whether it's a UK standard or something else, at least we know which language we're speaking, right? We all understand English. Somebody is a native speaker, somebody is not, but we understand each other, right? So we have a standard. Do you feel that the authorities should understand each other before they push it on to us? so that we know what to do, or that we'll have to deal with every request on their own, like we do now. There is one submission for this, one submission for that, the other submission for this. What is your view? Do we need to collaborate and to work with the authorities and to offer our expertise if they want it, to actually make a common platform for the construction in Dubai, for the betterment of Dubai, of the whole UAE?
I mean, I think there's no question that it's required. I mean, absolutely. You know, the whole world, you've seen anywhere it's mandated, you know, it pushes the advancement of BIM, and obviously we all want that. We're in the Middle East. We're in a really unique situation because we have all these companies who have developed great standards, and while there's a mandate that exists here in Dubai, it doesn't have that granular level of detail like some other countries. So what it means is that we actually have this great position where we can, I don't want to say pick and choose, but we can really adopt the best bits from everywhere and apply them here in the Middle East as necessary, and that's why we're commonly talking about PAS 1192. Yes, but as to how we move this forward, I mean, I do think bodies like the RTA have a huge role to play. Definitely. But we're all, again, I just come back to this communication aspect. Yes. We are all in the industry together. And while I'm sure, you know, it would be great to fill a room full of people and have that discussion, we know that that doesn't always help. But I'm sure we're all involved in some way in little groups who are all trying to formulate a plan going forward. And at the moment, I don't think there is quite the view of how that's going to happen. I think it has to happen, but it would be great to have a more detailed Dubai plan going forward that we can all work to, absolutely.
I concur. I mean, there's no doubts to that. That would add immense value to the industry, and it would really help standardize rather than us having one particular way of working, the consultant looking at it. One of the key challenges in collaboration for us at the moment is interoperability. So, you know, software producers, the technology providers, I would not want to call software. Yes. Yeah, let's call them technology.
I agree with the points that were made in the previous panel, yeah, that IFC is the common language of BIM. There is no disputing that, but the solution providers should definitely work together a little closer, because they have their margins, they have their sales to make, but we have projects to deliver.
Build, yes.
And if one thing doesn't work, I'm definitely going to look for another thing that works, regardless of anything else.
Can I just say something on the point about standards, because I think it's an important point, actually. You've talked about PAS 1192, the flow of information, but there's another issue with standards that I think we need to think about from a collaborative point of view, and that is the professions speaking to the technologists about standards. Because if you speak to the technologists, what they say they want is they want the industry and the professions to tell them what data standards to use. Exactly. So actually, I think we need to get much more on the front foot. The architects, the engineers, the surveyors, we need to be telling the technologists what data standards we want to use. And then the industry will respond to that, because that removes complexity for them in terms of the products that they need to place on the market. And I don't think there has been enough debate, actually, in that area. At the RICS, we've certainly tried to create international data standards, for example, in cost measurement with ICMS, that actually address this problem, but all the professions need to do it.
Exactly.
I think I want to go back to the first, the agency's role. You know, I speak a lot with the agencies, and it's a chicken and egg situation. And they, you know, in the early stages when the mandate came out, right before that, we used to have discussions around it. It was like, is the ecosystem ready? Are our consultants ready? Are our contractors ready? It's easy for them to mandate something, or they might have a consultant to write up all these standards and throw them out of it.
Is it actually going to work?
Exactly. So like you said, I don't know if my subcontractor is ready, is my specialization consultant ready. So I think the approach which Middle East has taken, I personally concur to it. It makes more sense what I've seen in the developed countries. They almost took the same route. It might look mature there today, but they have started way before the region. And we have to really support these initiatives as we grow further. It's easier today to meet submission requirements from Dubai municipality on the BIM mandate because it's not granular. Now imagine if it was granular 2 years ago and you were probably 50% ready and your supply chain was 20%, it will affect project schedule.
Yes.
So who is responsible for that money loss? So I think it's our responsibility is as we start meeting this standard and start adding on top of it, based on each tier of supply chain, starts adding value to it and let Dubai municipality and RTA and all the agencies see that additional piece. That will give them a confidence that our ecosystem is maturing and this is where they need to take the next level. Otherwise, issuing a mandate, it's like my dad saying, you got to run from here to there in 10 minutes, okay? So it doesn't mean anything. He has to
maybe I
teach me a
can
walk.
run, maybe
No,
I
cannot,
cannot run.
right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
ready
yeah,
yet.
yeah.
But if he starts talking me through the walk, then run, and then fast, that makes sense. The second aspect is this ecosystem also had a responsibility, and I as the solution provider and our Autodesk back, we talk a lot about it. How do we make it easy? How do we speak the language of the industry? And one of the things, like you said, we have industry still producing these beautiful, detailed, gorgeous models, but parallelly producing drawings to supplement. And that's the cost which was getting added to the project. So we are looking at how do we automate a lot of this stuff, and also that the people on the site can consume it, right? They don't have the big desktops, but each one have got a mobile, right? Each one have got an iPad. How do we take this data from these cool design offices to the site? That's where Autodesk and all the solution providers are really seeing how do we fill that gap. And I truly believe every time I speak with the contractors, they are saying one common theme. If my site team is able to consume this information, the rich information as is, I will be able to impact my project schedule. If I have to convert them back in 2D, it's not going to help.
It is also a point of communication.
Exactly.
Right? So we only have 5 minutes left for the questions. Are there any questions? No questions? We were that boring? Okay. I know that we are keeping you from coffee and pastries. I'm really sorry. I feel like a coffee myself. Don't worry. Yes.
Hi. I'm a BIM practitioner and also a BIM researcher. My question is for Autodesk representative, Mr. Suhail. It's very important, and just regarding to your panel question, that we facilitate the communication. I think language is not an issue, since everyone has a cheap app to just translate anything to any language to any language. But I think that facilitating the communication is the key issue. So as a client or as anyone involved in a project, I would buy the software that facilitates kind of global communication between the stakeholders. There are mega projects that involve hundreds of stakeholders, but not everyone has that technical, skills to use the software, but still they want to communicate with each other and solve the problem. So how Autodesk, what sort of thinking is behind Autodesk software, for example, for Revit, for any other application, that facilitate this sort of global communication between the different stakeholders in different parts of the world? I think if any software can solve this issue, then that would be great. So it will be a very, very good software that can just facilitate the communication between the stakeholders. So just to, my question is just to answer all this, to facilitate this sort of complex systems. How did you think about it?
I think I would agree with you. In past, the softwares were really very complex, and you needed, I hate this concept when people say, we have a BIM team. We never had a Microsoft Office team to write emails. It feels to me that I have an EA who is taking notes from me and writing an email. We still have to inherent the BIM as part of our day job. If I am a designer, I'm going to use 10 tools. This BIM should be one of those tools. I don't have to rely on a BIM guy, a BIM jockey coming with picks and clicks. And we were partly responsible, all the solution providers. Let me be honest with it. Because we were building these complex things. The tools were limited, you needed high power machines and all. So we wanted the immediate productivity. So that was the approach. But if you see the last decade, I don't know how many of you have been following Revit in the initial days of 2000s when we started looking at it to today, it's had come a long way. And our new line of products, let's not go there. The whole thought process is basically how a professional is working. Now, if you pick up a construction tool today, a collaboration tool today, and we're looking at some of these tools today, and it's certainly, as soon as you upload the models on the system now in the cloud platform, it generates automatically the list of the clashes and the collisions. And we thought of that, why were we not doing this 5 years ago? Because this is why when you assemble the models, they have to do this. So the point I'm saying is we have got dedicated teams back in Autodesk coming from industry, like myself who are from the construction, and each of that individual has one responsibility, that how does our software speak the language and does the job like the respective professional is going to do.
Yes, that's important.
Does that answer your question?
You know how they say, computers never do what we want, but they always do what we tell them to do. And the software doesn't do anything, we do everything. So please remember those two things, always. Software is a tool, BIM is a process, and computers are there to serve us. We are not there to serve them. Any more questions?
Just a last
Yes.
comment on that, and I think I would agree with Greg on this. One thing you all should really watch out on the software world is the artificial intelligence. Pay attention to what it is doing with your softwares and the tools around it. It is beyond just the tool anymore. If you are able to tap into that on that leading edge, it will differentiate a lot.
Any more questions, or we have answered everything, or you just want to have coffee?
There's a question there.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, my question is, what is the steps we need to take to face the security and copyright issue, as the model now is shared between all the team members and everyone have access to it to do his part, okay? So what are the steps we need to take to face this issue of copyright? This first question. Second question is, when you expected that we start to use a 3D model in our submissions rather than using the 2D drawings? Thank you.
The first question is linked to the contract types. What is your opinion?
Yeah.
The way
Alejandro?
I was just going to say, what's interesting is when referring to the model and the information that's in that model and the construction documents.
Quickly.
The-
People
the
want
di-
to
the
drink
di- well, I
coffee.
was just going to say, there's just a huge difference. I think there's so much information that would be needed in the models versus the contract documents. I mean, there's the details, there's three-dimensional information that's just not in there. Why? Because, again, going back to, you can't put all that information in there, not in the systems that we have today. I mean, it's
Yeah.
no matter how great it is, it's just too much information. So, again, that data and understanding what's in the model versus those construction documents and the difference between those. Handing over the model, many times there's too many assumptions, and that needs to be
Yes.
clarified. So,
Like they said, issuing the 2D, it's
Yeah.
much easier to not show the lack of information in the 2D drawings than in the model. In the model, if it's a box, period. Nitin, you wanted to
I'd
say
like
something?
to,
Excuse me, one point, just
Yeah.
one quick point. Based on this question,
Yeah.
should not the contract cover the data confidentiality clauses?
yeah, I
And
thi-
should not the contract ideally be an IPD contract or a design and
Ideally,
build
yes.
contract instead of DBB contract that are
Ideally, yes.
mostly here?
There's two parts to this. It's about administering BIM on a project, which is very, very important. You define your work in progress, you define your shared areas, you define your published areas and your archived areas. So we follow the PAS 1192-2 the best way we can. So in the WIP area, that's restricted to the guys who are developing the model. So unless otherwise it moves onto a shared platform, which is limited to the parties who are involved in the coordination process, that's where the model actually gets shared. Now, before it goes into the published or the archived areas, there is a check post there. There is a process which we have in place, where the model is actually checked, ensure that there is an approval process before it moves on. In a way, we're trying to manage the integrity with having access, limited access, read-write options, who's allowed to do what, and of course we have a log of who changes these events on these portals. And the thing is, the question that needs to be asked in these common data environments is the model live? Because if you look out of maybe 3 out of 5 solutions, they're not really live. They say it's live, it is not really live, except for very, very few solutions out there. So, and that is really one of the things that, in a way, unknowingly ensures the integrity of data. As far as the legality of it, yes, the contract should address it, the CIC BIM protocol, for instance. Yes, but apart from that, I think we're still not there yet.
And to your great relief, this is the end of this panel. We don't have any more time. Now we can all go out and have a break, if I'm not wrong, or maybe we have one more presentation before.
George, gentlemen, if you'd just like to stand there while we take a picture. Great session, Georgia. Thank you. A quick hand, please. I think some good things are picked up there. It's good to talk about 2D. That is the reality of today. I think last year we didn't actually pick that up quite so much, but it's the reality today, and hopefully not the reality of tomorrow. What is reality, however, you have a break. So if you can get out there, get yourself a coffee, but get back here promptly. Within 10 to 15 minutes, we'll be ringing the bell to look at the next panel session, which is on the revolution in fabrication. So see you then. Thank you very much.